Urgent news from Istanbul, everything has been decided, the negotiations are over. Meanwhile, Germany has woken up, Merz has taken everything into his own hands, Putin is sounding the alarm, Ukraine holds a trump card, and Ukrainian engineers have come up with astonishing developments that will dramatically change the front. France is preparing a massive aid package, and revolutionary artillery will change everything. Russian soldiers are living shorter and shorter lives. Analysts have uncovered a terrible secret. Soon they will stop advancing. Urgent news from Istanbul. Everything has been decided. The negotiations are over. Russia's shocking stance on the negotiations. They have refused to compromise. What concessions is Russia willing to make? And what has the Russian side come up with this time? These facts will shock you. Watch this episode for all the details.
Germany has woken up. Merz has taken everything into his own hands. Putin is sounding the alarm. Right now, the country is preparing for war and is taking the lead in military power on the continent. For itself, what exactly is happening and how will this reign in the Kremlin? Find out in this episode. The Chancellor of Germany has promised to create the strongest army in Europe.
In his first speech, Friedrich Merz stated that Germany must take greater responsibility for the security of the continent. Questions of defense and development.
Essentially, the revival of the sense of a great, strong Germany is what Merz, the new chancellor, has taken up as his banner. Germany wants to restore its power. It wants to reclaim its leading position in Europe. To realize its ambitions, Germany plans to increase defense spending and invest in the modernization of its armed forces. Merz noted that the country is obliged to fulfill its commitments to NATO and its partners. Now, the situation is fundamentally changing. The European Union won, and after all, Germany is the heart of the European Union, the locomotive of economic development. So, the European Union is now facing an unprecedented situation. However, there are areas and challenges it has never encountered before, especially such as these. Such ambitions raise questions about how they will affect the balance of power in Europe and relations with neighboring countries. How will other European countries react to Germany's genuine attempts to become autonomous from dependence on the United States of America? To develop its own European security framework and provide it with the production capabilities for armaments, yes, everyone will just applaud. Because the risks, for example, of aggression from the Russian Federation, especially in Eastern European countries, are perceived as more than realistic. Such initiatives by Merz will be supported both within the European Union and by countries that see risks of aggression from the Russian Federation, and not only from the Russian Federation. What is known at the moment? Germany currently has 260,000 military personnel, while a fully staffed armed forces should number about 460,000 people. These are ambitious goals that are now fully supported by the German people. I have stamps. At the moment, the trust rating and the Germans, according to sociological data, I looked at it recently, support and are ready to follow Scholz in achieving these goals. Germany is taking this seriously. The authorities are not limiting themselves to just statements. Already in 2025, the defense budget is expected to increase by more than 15%. At the same time, large-scale investments in the army and military infrastructure are being planned. This will also create opportunities for investment because there is a lot of money in Germany that is looking for additional, let's say, niches for investment. These are jobs, and this is an absolutely new role for Germany. Once again, I want to emphasize not only as the economic driver and locomotive of the European Union, but as a country that is in general not only the heart, but essentially providing a kind of steel armor for Europe. And they are ready to take on this responsibility.
Strengthening the German army is not just a domestic task, but also an important signal to Russia. In the context of rising tensions in Europe, such steps could change Moscow's calculations and influence its strategy in the region. But will this reduce provocations and actions from the Kremlin?
Is it beneficial for the Russian Federation, for Germany to become strong? Obviously, it is not. Because along with its strength, Germany will take on a leadership role in Europe and make Europe as a whole stronger. Again, this is absolutely categorically disadvantageous for the Russian Federation. But will there be risks? Will the Russian Federation try to derail this militaristic course of Germany? Of course, yes.
During his speech, Merz also emphasized Germany's firm support for Ukraine. He also threatened Russia with tough sanctions in the event of further aggressive actions, strengthening the German army. This is not only about ensuring our own security, but also an important signal of solidarity with Ukraine and its partners.
Another trump card in Ukraine's hands is the stunning developments by Ukrainian engineers, which will powerfully change the front. The country is preparing for previously unseen scales of production of electronic warfare devices. At the same time, something strange is happening at the front. Russia is suffering colossal equipment losses. Pokrovsk has become a thorn in their side. The story will explain how Russia lost a ton of equipment as they approached Pokrovsk. Ukraine is building an anti-drone wall. A unique electronic warfare project could cover the entire front. Ukrainian developers of electronic warfare systems have launched a large-scale defense project called Atlas, which could fundamentally change the rules of the game at the front. Its goal is to create an anti-drone wall capable of protecting 1,300 kilometers of the front line from enemy drones. What makes Atlas unique? At the heart of the project are the new Mirage and Azimuth systems, which, when used together, not only jam signals but also generate the precise frequency needed to neutralize a drone. Azimuth determines the coordinates and operating frequencies of the enemy UAV, while Mirage instantly jams it. This architecture makes the system flexible, fast, and effective. These are characteristics that impress. Enemy drones can be detected at a distance of up to 30 kilometers. Effective jamming is possible up to 8 kilometers. The ability to combine into a unified network with remote control. The project cost is over 5 billion. The government covers only 10% of the required expenses. Everything else falls on the shoulders of the army, volunteers, and charity. Fundraising is already underway around the world, and anyone can join in using the QR code. Experience and practice. The project is supported by a manufacturer from Kyiv, who has an entire museum of electronic warfare systems to their name, all tested in combat conditions, from drone rifles and backpacks to mobile and trench jammers. Mirage and Azimuth have been operating on the front lines for almost a year now, and their main mission at this point is to protect Ukrainian FPV drone operators and ensure a safe air corridor for their own drones. Technological evolution for the sake of saving lives. The Atlas project is not just about technology, it is a chance to save the lives of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers and civilians. It is a technological wall that can stop enemy drones before they strike. Meanwhile, drones have destroyed equipment and a dozen occupiers in the Donbas. In the Donetsk direction, Ukrainian drone operators from the Komsta brigade carried out a targeted attack on the positions of Russian occupation forces. This was reported on May 16th by the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine, which published a video of the successful combat operation. The Phoenix Unmanned Systems unit identified enemy targets and delivered a precise strike. As a result, one armored vehicle was destroyed and about 10 Russian infantrymen were eliminated. Footage from the scene confirms the effectiveness and accuracy of the attack. This is one of the most effective drone units within the Pomsta Assault Brigade. They have already destroyed hundreds of pieces of equipment and enemy personnel. Phoenix is not just a symbol of rebirth, but a real force on the front line. The Russians are pushing toward the border of the Dnipropetrovsk region. What is the military and political logic behind this offensive? There is also increased activity of Russian troops on the southern front. According to a representative of the Southern Defense Forces, the enemy is intensifying its offensive in the Novopavlivka direction with the goal of reaching the administrative borders of the Dnipropetrovsk and Zaporizhia regions. The daily number of assaults there reaches 27, and at the same time the Russians are actively using armored vehicles, motorcycles, and small infantry groups. Why does Russia need this advance? The goal of this offensive is not only political, namely to demonstrate a presence in the Dnipropetrovsk region, but also strategic, specifically to gain control over key logistical routes that connect the eastern part of Donetsk region with the south, particularly with Zaporizhia. There is also an additional aim to isolate Ukrainian forces holding positions in the Donetsk region. The front is holding, but the pressure is increasing. There is also an intensification of offensive actions in the area of Polyipol and Orikhiv. The Russians are trying to break through the defenses with small assault groups, having abandoned large-scale battalion offensives after previous failures. These actions have been ongoing for 9 to 10 months ever since the battles for Vuhledar and Velika Novosilka. That's all for today. Tune in tomorrow for the next news up.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
France is preparing a massive aid package. The EU will replace the US. Revolutionary artillery will change everything. A new formidable weapon of French manufacture, the best of its kind, and all for Ukraine. How close is the balance of firepower and how much will this strengthen the armed forces of Ukraine? Find out in this report.
These self-propelled artillery units are among the best in the world. They are maneuverable, automated, rapid firing, and accurate.
A major advantage is the wheeled chassis because it makes the unit highly maneuverable. Then there's the high rate of fire and the ability to use navigation equipment that allows the unit to take up a firing position in just a few minutes.
We're talking about the French Caesar self-propelled artillery units, which have become an integral part of the Ukrainian armed forces since 2022. And Ukrainian soldiers rate their effectiveness extremely highly.
The firing range allows us to hit enemy artillery at any distance, from the front line, no matter where it's positioned. If we're talking specifically about self-propelled artillery, this is the best we've been given.
And now their numbers will increase several times over. France has promised to deliver to Ukraine all Caesar self-propelled artillery units that will be produced in 2025. That's about twice as many as have been delivered throughout the entire full-scale war. After all, France plans to produce 12 systems per month. That means 144 self-propelled artillery units will be produced in a year, and all of them will go to Ukraine.
We can recall that France was the first to provide us with AMX wheeled tanks. That France has always advocated for worldwide support for Ukraine. And while other countries were still hesitating, we were already receiving French weaponry and French in our purpose, a French structure for conducting combat operations. So this is quite a logical step, a completely understandable move. Unexpectedly pleasant, but overall not very surprising.
But such a number of Caesars also means a huge sum for them. One French self-propelled artillery unit costs about 5 million euros. 144 will cost 720 million euros. I don't even want to calculate that in hryvnias. So, who will pay for it?
Various sources of funding are now being used to pay for these self-propelled guns, including partially from frozen or seized Russian assets, partially from other countries. This needs to be discussed. In particular, the Minister of the Metropolitan Company, Asatanin, has repeatedly, as well as the Presidential Advisor and former Minister, with the help of what we to predict funds that will be specifically allocated for the payment of weapons, which will be produced both for Ukraine and within Ukraine itself.
We've sorted out the money, so now it's time to talk about something positive. Besides the obvious advantage of the self-propelled guns themselves, this transfer could also mean that Europe has started to take the Russian threat seriously, that if Ukraine does not hold out, the EU will be Putin's next target.
He wakes up and the morgue and the city halls are not very welcoming.
And this is extremely important news. It would have been better if it happened earlier, not in the fourth year of a full-scale war, but better late than never. The only question now is when the brand new Caesars will arrive. Will they be delivered monthly or all at once in a single batch at the end of 2025 or the beginning of 2026? There is no answer to this question yet, but is it needed at all? It's better to keep such information secret so that the occupiers can fully experience the whole range of emotions. So to speak, from Paris with love, or see Caesar and die.
Russian soldiers are living shorter and shorter lives. Analysts have revealed a terrible secret. soon they will stop advancing. How long do Russian conscripts live? How well are they prepared? A personnel crisis is looming in Russia. You'll find out all about this right now.
A direct hit. Ukrainian forces destroyed a Tor air defense missile system with a drone in temporarily occupied Kakhovka.
Still, the sound of a helicopter.
And this is the spectacular work of the Typhoon unmanned systems unit destroying occupiers in the Pokrovsk direction. The negotiations planned to take place today, May 15th, in Turkey, have not eased the situation at the front.
This is not about a ceasefire. It's about a Russian offensive and our defensive actions. Moreover, the intensity of combat operations has increased in some directions that the Russians consider to be their priorities. Their key areas, the intensity has risen, both in the number of assault actions and in the shelling using aviation and artillery weapons employed by the Russian Federation.
It seems that Europeans do not believe the war will end anytime soon. In particular, France has decided to transfer to Ukraine all Caesar self-propelled artillery units that will be produced throughout 2025. Russia is receiving a worthy response to its aggression. A real war is raging in the skies over Donetsk region, with enemy reconnaissance and strike aircraft, considered among the most effective in the occupying army, being destroyed.
First of all, it is obvious that the offensive actions characteristic of this spring will smoothly but very loudly, accompanied by the roar of artillery fire, transition into the summer offensive campaign that Russia is planning, which, according to the Russian Federation's plans, is expected to be large-scale. And accordingly, we are talking about the hottest directions at the moment, Pokrovsk and Konstantinovka.
The Russians are pushing into Ukraine, but they can't defend their own territory. The Russian command continues to report to the dictator that the Kursk region has been completely cleared of Ukrainian defense forces. They also claim that the Belgorod region is supposedly free, but this information, of course, does not correspond to reality.
It is obvious that these tasks which our troops continue to carry out in the Kursk region are painful for the Russians, because today the heights that are under control, the border heights under the control of the defense forces of Ukraine, make it possible to strike at the enemy's logistics, first and foremost, to strike at those units that are trying to push our defense forces out of the Kursk region. Our presence in the Kursk region today allows us to prevent the Russians from launching a broader offensive campaign against the Sumy region. Accordingly, the defense forces of Ukraine have already created and to a large extent established a kind of sanitary buffer zone for us here.
The Russian authorities aim to reach a monthly mobilization figure of 50 to 60,000 throughout 2025. However, for now, they prefer to send poorly trained recruits into grueling infantry assaults in order to seize as much Ukrainian territory as possible.
If you compare the first week of May to the second, on some sections it has almost doubled. This in turn speaks to our active defensive actions, and accordingly also points to the very high level of activity and resources the enemy is using in their offensive.
Putin is ready to use all possible means and methods to achieve his goals, including blackmail. Russian military propaganda has once again raised the topic of striking Ukraine with a ballistic missile, which they call the Oreshnik.
Even if we assume that some kind of Oreshnik exists, I think Putin would have used it a long time ago. For now, we see that this is just a bluff inflated by Russian propaganda, nothing more.
That's all for today. Subscribe, like, and leave your comments. Watch other news in the next episode of Hotspot.